Bigfoot, a 50-year journey come full circle, written by Dr. Matthew A. Johnson. I'm Willi Rose, and this is Chapter 8, My Broken Heart. It was in the early spring of 2002. Dr. Leroy Fish accompanied Dr. York and me in our research area. He was a wildlife biologist and a member of the Bigfoot Field Research Organization, BFRO. Our reports and TV interviews were generating a lot of interest in the community of Bigfootdom. By this point in time, Dr. York and I had been interviewed together by multiple media agencies, including the Travel Channel, In Search Of, Real Scary Stories, the BBC, a French documentary film crew, some children's TV shows, and many news channels, too. As a result of all the media attention that we were receiving and the evidence that we were producing, Dr. Fish chose to contact me and expressed a strong desire to come to Southern Oregon to visit with the both of us. Dr. York and I spent a couple nights with Dr. Fish in our research area. Both he and Dr. York enjoyed one another's company. They quickly became members of the Mutual Admiration Society because of the great respect that they had for one another. We gave Dr. Fish the red carpet tour, including the spot along the logging road where a creek ran underneath the road through a culvert. We showed him where an alleged dispute took place between two Bigfoot adult males. In this spot, approximately 10 willow trees had been snapped over between 8 to 9 feet off the ground right next to the creek. Also, a 500-pound boulder had been placed right next to the strand of snapped-over trees. 5 of us very large and strong men could not lift the rock up together. The rock had not rolled down the hill, as some research teams initially speculated. The evidence on the rock was clear. The base of the rock, where it was stuck in the dirt, was very dirty. There was no other dirt to be found on the rock. Also, the top layer of the rock had a light, flaky layer of moss spread all over it. The flaky moss was so fragile that you could scrape it off with a slight movement of a single finger. Yet, all of the light, flaky moss on the top of the rock was completely intact. If that large rock had rolled down the mountainside, it would have dirt all over it, and the light, flaky moss would be gone. Dr. Fish looked very closely at the rock, examined the mountainside above the rock, and arrived at the same conclusion we did. The very large and heavy rock had been intentionally placed on the road right next to the snapped-over willow trees for a reason. He asked how we knew that there was a dispute that led to the snapping of the willow trees and the placement of the large rock. We proceeded to tell him about our informant, Crazy Jack, a gentleman that we had met during the early summer of 2001. He occupied the lookout tower on the top of the ridgeline and was trying to communicate with us by flashing a mirror at us. I had a map and figured out how to reach the tower via the logging roads on the other side of the ridgeline. Unfortunately, the last 200 yards of the road were steeper than steep, and we had to walk up the hill on foot. There was no way that I was going to drive my Suburban up or down that incredibly steep hill. When we made our way to the top of the hill and stood at the bottom of the lookout tower, Crazy Jack came down the tower stairs, screaming and cussing all the way at the top of his lungs. He was telling us about how he fought in the Vietnam War and that he had killed a lot of men, and he had no problem killing a few more. He also said something about cutting off our heads, crapping down our throats, and mailing our skulls to our next of kin. We were all kind of looking at one another and smiling, acknowledging to each other that we thought his bark was worse than his bite. He wasn't carrying any weapons, so we knew that we were safe. When he finally reached us, I walked up to him, stuck my hand out, and said, "Hello, I'm Dr. Johnson, and these are my friends. We are the group of men that you were trying to communicate with this morning by flashing your mirror at us from on top of your tower." He responded, "Well, why didn't you say so? I apologize for being so rude, but you never know who you're going to run into up here in the mountains." "So what are you guys doing down there every 2 to 4 weeks?" I told him about our newfound hairy hobby, that we were Bigfoot researchers. Crazy Jack thought it was cool and stated, "Those animals are very real. I had one down here at the foot of my tower just the other night. My dog was going crazy and barking up a storm." I looked over the edge and I could see him moving around. Then he started up the stairs and I started yelling and screaming at him, and I fired a couple of warning shots. He jumped off the stairs and ran away in a hurry. It didn't take him many steps to cover a lot of ground. We exchanged cell phone numbers and kept in touch with Crazy Jack every time we drove up to our research area. He kept an eye on things to let us know whether or not other people were visiting our area. Also, he kept us informed about whether or not he saw or heard any Bigfoot activity in the area. That's how we learned about the alleged dispute between the two Bigfoot males at the bottom of the hill, near where the creek was coming down the mountainside and crossed underneath the road through the culvert. Thereafter, when we drove up to the area, Crazy Jack would give me a call or I would give him a call. He told us about the dispute that took place in the middle of a pitch-dark night. We went and investigated, and that's when we found the snapped-over willow trees and a large heavy rock that had been placed on the road right beside them. He had no knowledge about the snapped-over trees or the placement of the large rock. He could not see them from the tower. The story that Crazy Jack told fascinated Dr. Leroy Fish. He wanted to go up to the tower and meet the storyteller. I made a deal with both Dr. Fish and Dr. York that I would transport them to the base of the steep hill. Then they would have to wait while I went and got Crazy Jack to come down the hill and meet with them. They agreed. However, when we reached the base of the hill, both Dr. Fish and Dr. York told me that they thought they could make it up the hill just fine without any difficulties. Keep in mind that Dr. Fish was 59 and Dr. York was 69. Neither one of them were in very good shape. Matter of fact, it was my assessment that their egos were getting in the way of proper decision-making. I kindly stated as much, but they both argued with me that if they took their time, they could reach the top without the trip killing them. Well, they made it. We stopped several times along the way, and I was scared to death. The journey was much tougher than either one of them anticipated. Nevertheless, they were able to enjoy meeting Crazy Jack, listening to his stories, and they both enjoyed the view. They were correct. The journey up the mountainside did not kill them. Well, at that moment in time, it didn't kill them. However, approximately 1 week later, Dr. Leroy Fish died in his shop from congestive heart failure. I felt so bad when I heard about his passing. I kicked myself in the butt over and over again regarding the fact that I should have made both he and Dr. York wait at the bottom of the steep hill like they had promised that they would. It broke my heart to know that his hike up that very steep hill may have been the catalyst for his early demise. I told this to Dr. York, and he responded to me by saying, "Matt, when it's your time to go, it's your time to go. At least he enjoyed being here with us, learning more about Bigfoot, meeting Crazy Jack, and he got to enjoy the incredible view. He died doing what he loved doing. There's no better way to go than that. Well, I didn't tell Dr. York this, but I sure as heck wasn't going to allow him to march up any more steep hills in the future. Matter of fact, Bill had talked about going up the hill to visit with Crazy Jack to catch up on any stories, and I simply called him on the cell phone and handed it to Dr. York. I watched over him like a baby. We grew to become best friends, and he was like a father figure to me. Around this time, Dr. York and I had turned our research team into a nonprofit organization because we wanted to raise funds for better high-tech equipment. We figured with all of the media attention that we were receiving that we could obtain tax-deductible donations to help us out with our goals. We were too dependent on the kindness of Don Moser and his high-tech equipment. He wasn't always available to come out with us every time we were in the field. It was a long 3-hour drive for him to make it every time from Eugene, Oregon. Also, he had a life, a wife, a family, and he enjoyed playing tennis and acting on the side. We simply couldn't expect Don to come down to Southern Oregon and play with us every time we were ready to go out into the field. Therefore, the Southern Oregon Bigfoot Society, the SOBS, was formed and established as a nonprofit organization. We were not only active in the Bigfoot research field, inviting anyone and everyone to come and join us, we also sponsored monthly meetings in Grants Pass, Oregon. We held monthly Bigfoot meetings at the Black Forest restaurant in their meeting room. We always filled the room to capacity. It was fun to meet with the regulars, plus see new people visit with us from time to time. Unfortunately, we had a member in the Southern Oregon Bigfoot Society who took it upon himself to use the nonprofit status for his own personal gain. Dr. York and I didn't want anything to do with his unethical behaviors. We certainly didn't want the IRS breathing down our necks because of him. In November 2003, we were experiencing a warmer winter than usual in Southern Oregon. There was no snow in our research area yet. Dr. York and I made our way out to the research area for some alone time. We didn't have the large crowds with us. It was just the two of us. We enjoyed our walks through the forest and our time sitting around the campfire at night. I always enjoyed listening to his stories about his time in Africa. One night, while sitting around the campfire, we discussed the individual who was taking advantage of our nonprofit status for his own personal gain. I was the president of the SOBS, and Dr. York was the vice president. We decided that we were going to have to boot this individual from the organization and turn him into the IRS. It was a difficult decision to make, but we knew we had to do it. The next morning, Dr. York wanted to drive to the other side of the ridgeline and go up the steep hill and visit with Crazy Jack and see if he had any stories to share. I pulled out my cell phone and called Crazy Jack's number several times, but there was no answer. I told Bill that I thought it was too late in the year and that Crazy Jack most likely wasn't up in the tower watching for fires now. However, at Bill's insistence, I drove him around to the other side of the mountain. When we reached the bottom of the hill, I practically begged Bill to let me go see if Crazy Jack was up in the tower. If he was there, I could fetch Crazy Jack and bring him back down. Bill expressed an appreciation for my concern, but assured me that I didn't have to coddle him. We hiked up the hill slowly but surely. When we reached the top, it was clear that Crazy Jack was not in the tower. As I predicted, it was too late in the year and fire season was over. There was no need for Crazy Jack to man the lookout tower. Bill said, "Well, Matt, we still get to enjoy this incredible view." Incredible it was. The views were spectacular. I enjoyed this moment of quiet solitude with my very good friend. I can still see him standing there, taking in the view and taking deep breaths of the fresh, crisp air on top of the mountain. About a week later, I was driving back to Grants Pass, Oregon, from my parents' home in Salem, Oregon. I received a call from my wife, who informed me that Dr. York had passed away the previous night in his sleep. I almost drove off the highway. I felt my heart break in half. I cried and cried and cried the rest of the way home. I was sobbing so hard that I couldn't see straight. I felt like I had just lost my best friend and father all wrapped in one package. While driving my Suburban, I became angry and started yelling at Bill. "Why wouldn't you listen to me? I told you that you shouldn't have hiked up that damn steep hill. I told you that that hill probably killed Dr. Fish and that it might kill you too, but you wouldn't listen to me." I cried and cried some more. The wind was officially out of my sails. I was numb. I was done. I threw in the towel. The following week, I resigned from the Southern Oregon Bigfoot Society. I no longer had Bill on my side to take care of business and clean house. Therefore, I turned the reins of the organization over and walked away from everything. I stopped going out to the research area, and I stopped involving myself in anything Bigfoot related. I was done. Shortly thereafter, I lost my marriage and had no motivation to keep going out into the field. I had met my second wife during this time and started focusing more on our relationship and the transition that my 3 children were going through. Don't let anyone fool you. Divorce sucks for everyone, no matter how hard you try to smooth things out for the kids. I didn't have time to go out and conduct Bigfoot research in the middle of this significant transition that was occurring for my children and myself. I spent time playing with them and coaching their teams. My second wife enjoyed hearing about my Bigfoot research stories, and she strongly suggested that I get back up on the horse and go back out into the mountains. I really wasn't that interested. However, I would occasionally take her, family members, or some friends passing through the area out to the woods. I had to admit it was nice to get back out there into the forest every once in a while. We created some fond memories sitting around the campfire at night while talking about past Bigfoot adventures, but seriously, I was done. My broken heart took all of the motivation out of me and the wind out of my sails. I was no longer planning to go back into the woods to look for Bigfoot. Little did I know, I may have given up on looking for them, but that didn't mean that they were going to give up on looking for me. The saga continued. That's the end of Chapter 8. Chapter 9 is just around the corner. It's called, of all things, Hotel California. Bigfoot is written by Dr. Matthew A. Johnson. I'm Willi Rose.